Anna Farwell pressed her hand flat against her chest the morning the letter arrived, not to calm her heart, but to hold it in place. Her sister Diana stood in the parlor doorway, laughing, saying his name like it cost her nothing. Jonathan is coming home. 3 words, and every one of them landed like a stone dropped into still water, deep, cold, spreading. Anna had spent 3 years learning how to breathe around the absence of that name. Now, here it was again, and she was not ready. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, subscribe to this channel, follow along until the very last word, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The summer of 1810 came to Boston the way bad news always did, without warning and without mercy. The heat had settled over the city like a wool blanket nobody asked for, thick and suffocating, pressing down on every cobblestone lane and every parlor window left open in desperate hope of a breeze. Church bells rang on Sunday mornings, and merchant carts rattled through the streets on weekday afternoons, and the women of Boston's better families gathered in their sitting rooms to exchange information disguised as conversation. It was in one of those sitting rooms, modest by the standards of Beacon Hill, but well kept, with curtains sewn by their mother's own hands, that Anna Farwell first heard his name spoken aloud again after 3 years of silence. She had been sitting near the window with a book open in her lap, not reading it, watching the way the afternoon light moved across the floorboards the way it always did in July, slow and golden and indifferent to the lives being lived beneath it. She had been thinking about nothing in particular, or so she had trained herself to believe. Then Diana swept into the room the way Diana always swept into any room, like weather arriving, like something that expected to be noticed. And she held up a folded letter and said, "He's coming home." Anna turned a page she had not read. "Did you hear me?" Diana said. "Anna, Jonathan Pierce is coming home. He's been discharged. The war is over for him." "I heard you." "Well?" Diana lowered herself onto the settee across from her sister and smoothed her skirts with both hands, a gesture their mother had taught them both, but that only Diana had ever perfected. "Aren't you going to say something?" "What would you like me to say?" Diana made a small sound in the back of her throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite impatience, something in between. "I'd like you to say something that isn't nothing for once in your life." Anna closed the book. "Jonathan Pierce was your betrothed, Diana. He hasn't been mine. He hasn't been anything to me. You're the one who ought to be feeling things about this." "I'm married," Diana said, and her voice went just slightly flat on that word. Married. Like a door closing. "I made my choice. William is a good man." "He is," Anna agreed. "So Jonathan coming back doesn't change a single thing for me." "Then why did you come in here to tell me about it?" The silence between them lasted exactly 3 seconds. Anna counted without meaning to. She'd always counted things. Steps between rooms, days since a letter stopped coming. Years since she'd allowed herself to feel what she refused to name. Diana folded the letter again along its existing creases and set it on the side table as if it were nothing. As if she hadn't carried it in from the hallway. As if she hadn't read it at least twice before bringing it here. "Mother will want to receive him," Diana said finally. "She always liked Jonathan. Everyone always liked Jonathan." "You say that like it's an accusation." "I say it like it's a fact." Anna stood up from her chair and smoothed her own skirts, not with Diana's practiced ease, but with the efficient movement of a woman who had things to do even when she didn't. "When does he arrive?" "The letter says end of the week. Then I suppose we'll see him end of the week." She walked out of the room without hurrying and without looking back, and she went upstairs to the small room she had called her own for 24 years, and she sat on the edge of her bed and she pressed both hands flat against her thighs, and she stayed very still. End of the week. She had been doing well. She needed that on the record somewhere, even if only in the private court of her own mind. She had been doing genuinely, functionally well. She had made her peace, or something that passed for peace if you didn't press on it too hard. She had her books, her garden, her mother's kitchen when the mornings felt long, and the company of a few women in town she could call friends without stretching the word. She had all of that. It had been enough. She had decided that it was enough, and she had meant it, and she had held to it through 2 winters and 3 summers. And the particular loneliness of every Christmas when Diana and William came to visit and filled the house with noise that somehow made the quiet afterward feel louder than before. End of the week. Jonathan Pierce had been gone from her life for 3 years. He had never technically been in her life, not in the way it counted. He had been Diana's, promised to Diana since they were both old enough for such promises to be made by their families on their behalf. He had come to their house for dinners and holiday gatherings, and the occasions that Boston society constructed to keep its better families connected. And Anna had sat at those tables and passed the bread, and listened to him talk about politics, about books, about the shape of the country and what it was becoming. And she had said almost nothing, and he had directed almost nothing at her. And that had been entirely correct, and entirely appropriate, and entirely fine. And she had gone upstairs after every one of those evenings and told herself it was fine. Then the war had taken him away, and Diana had not waited. Anna had never been able to decide which part of that she had hated more, that Diana hadn't waited, or that Diana hadn't seemed to think waiting was something she owed. "You can't hold your breath for a man who might not come back," Diana had said, 6 months after Jonathan shipped out, when the letters from the front had grown shorter and less frequent, and the news from the war was not good. She had said it to their mother, not to Anna, but Anna had been in the kitchen doorway and had heard every word. "William Hurst has been very attentive, and he is here, and he is alive, and I am not getting any younger." Their mother had said something soft and non-committal in response. Anna had gone back out into the garden. Diana married William Hurst 11 months after Jonathan left for the front. Jonathan's last letter home, to the Farwell house, where he had written to Diana, had arrived 6 weeks before the wedding. Anna knew this because she had been the one to receive it when the post came, and she had brought it to Diana's room, and Diana had set it aside without opening it immediately, and when Anna had left and gone back downstairs, she had stood in the hallway for a long moment and thought about what kind of woman she was. She had decided, then and there, that she was not the kind who opened other people's letters, and she had walked away. She had never found out what that letter said. She thought about it sometimes, not as often as she once had, but sometimes. Jonathan Pierce arrived on a Friday in the late afternoon, when the worst of the summer heat had backed off just enough to make being outdoors bearable. Anna was in the garden when she heard the carriage on the street. She didn't go inside. She heard her mother's voice through the back window, that warm, welcoming sound their mother made when someone she cared about came through the door, that particular rise in pitch that meant you matter to this house. She heard the lower rumble of a man's voice in response. She couldn't make out the words. She stayed in the garden for another 20 minutes, longer than she needed to, longer than made any practical sense given that the herb she was tending had been tended already. She was aware of what she was doing. She was choosing the garden over the parlor, and she was doing it deliberately, and she was not ashamed of it. When she finally came inside, her hands still carrying the faint green smell of rosemary, he was sitting in the wingback chair by the fireplace. Not because there was a fire, it was July, but because it was the chair their father had always sat in, and guests somehow always found it. And he was talking with her mother in the careful, measured way of a man choosing each word with some effort. He looked up when she came in. She had expected him to look older. She had expected 3 years of war to write themselves plainly on his face, the way a hard season writes itself on a field. And in some ways they had. There were lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there before. A stillness in his jaw that read like something held in check. His hands, resting on the arms of the chair, were still and deliberate in a way that struck her as practiced. Like a man who had taught himself to keep his hands from moving because they had, at some point, moved the wrong way. But his eyes were the same. That was the thing she hadn't prepared for. The same dark, careful eyes that had looked at her across a dozen dinner tables without ever quite landing on her. The same eyes that had always seemed to be taking stock of everything in a room while appearing to focus on just one thing. "Miss Farwell," he said. "Mr. Pierce." She crossed to the side table and set down the small basket she'd been carrying. "Welcome home." "Thank you." A pause. "You look well." "I am well, thank you." Her mother was watching both of them with the bright, careful attention of a woman who noticed things and filed them away for later. Anna had always loved her mother and been faintly terrified of her for exactly this reason. "Jonathan was just telling me about Philadelphia," her mother said. "He's been there these past few weeks, since his discharge." "Philadelphia," Anna said. "That's a long way to come by carriage in July." "It is," Jonathan said. "I don't recommend it." Something almost like humor in his voice, something that hadn't quite made it to his face. "Will you be staying in Boston long?" Anna asked. "I haven't decided." He said it simply, without apology, like a man who had learned not to make promises about time. "I have some business to attend to. The estate has been managed by a steward in my absence. There are matters that need my attention." "Of course." Her mother appeared in the doorway between the parlor and the hallway. "I'll go see about some refreshment. Anna, will you?" "I'll keep Mr. Pierce company," Anna said. Which was, she thought immediately after saying it, exactly the wrong thing to say. Not because it was inappropriate, but because she had said it too quickly, with too much certainty, like a woman who had been waiting for the opportunity. She saw a flicker of something cross her mother's face. Not concern, not quite, but awareness, before her mother disappeared into the hallway. Then it was just the two of them. The clock on the mantel measured out a handful of seconds. "Your sister," Jonathan said. "She isn't here today?" "No. Diana and William are at their home on Marlborough Street." A beat. "You knew she had married?" "I heard, yes." He looked at the window for a moment. "I heard when I was still at the front. Someone, I don't remember who now, mentioned it in a letter." "Are you—" She stopped herself. She was not going to ask him if he was all right. She was not going to treat him like a man who needed that question. "Did you have time to make peace with it before you came back?" He turned to look at her then, not quickly, but fully. The way he'd looked at things across those dinner tables, with that thorough, measuring attention that somehow always made Anna feel both seen and uncertain about being seen. "That's a direct question," he said. "I've always found direct questions save time." "They do." He was quiet for a moment. "I made peace with many things over the past 3 years, Miss Farwell. I'm not certain peace is the right word for all of them, but I made some manner of accommodation." "That's honest." "I try to be." "It's more than most people manage." He looked at her again, that same careful, thorough attention. And this time, there was something in it she couldn't immediately name. Not surprise exactly, something more like recalibration. "I don't remember you speaking so plainly," he said. "At dinners. Before." "You didn't ask me much." "No," he said. "I didn't." Another pause. "I'm asking now, if you'll allow it." Her hands were still against her skirt. She was still making them so. "You may ask what you like, Mr. Pierce." Did she... He stopped, started again. Was Diana happy before... I mean, in the months before she made her choice? When I was gone? Was she... She was, Anna said, and she said it clearly and without hesitation, because it was the truth, and because she owed him the truth more than she owed him a comfortable version of it. Diana has always found her happiness in the present moment. She doesn't look backward. It's a quality I've sometimes envied in her. I see. She made the choice that made sense for her situation. She didn't know if you were coming back. None of us did. I understand that. I'm not defending her, Anna said. I'm just telling you what was. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. He looked at his hands. And you? He said finally. What were you doing in those 3 years? The question was so simple and so direct that she almost laughed. Living, she said. Same as anyone. You didn't marry? No. Most women your age, forgive me, I don't mean that as a, I know you don't, she said. No, I didn't marry. Was that by choice or circumstance? She considered him for a moment. The afternoon light was changing, moving across the floor the way it always did at this hour, slow and golden and indifferent. The clock on the mantel kept its quiet pace. Both, she said. Mostly choice. I see, he said again, and then, quietly, you kept writing to your sister while I was gone. She mentioned once, early on, before the letters became fewer, that you had encouraged her to write back to me. Anna went very still. She told you that? She mentioned it, in passing. He was watching her carefully. Why did you do that? Because you were at war, Anna said, and letters matter when you're at war. Any letter, from anyone who means something. She paused. And because Diana isn't always reliable about doing the things she ought to do when it costs her something. I knew writing to you cost her, eventually. I didn't want her to stop before she'd... Another pause. Shorter. Before the situation had resolved itself one way or another. Jonathan said nothing. I shouldn't have told you that, Anna said. No, he said. I'm glad you did. Her mother came back in then with a tray, and the conversation shifted into the ordinary territory of refreshment and small talk and the price of passage from Philadelphia in summer. And Anna poured tea and said the appropriate things and answered the questions put to her. And all the while, she was aware of Jonathan Pierce across the room, watching her with those same dark, careful eyes. Not the way he had watched her across a dozen dinner tables. Something had changed in the quality of his attention. She couldn't say what, exactly. She could only say that she felt it, the way you feel a shift in weather before you see it in the sky. When he stood to leave, an hour later, he took his hat from the table near the door and turned back once. Miss Farwell, he said. Mr. Pierce? I wonder... He stopped, seemed to consider something. I will be attending the Hartley gathering on Thursday evening. I believe the Hursts have been invited as well. I believe that's right. Will you be attending? She met his gaze without blinking. I haven't decided. Something moved in his expression. Something very quiet and very quick, like a candle flame in a draught. I hope you will, he said. I find I have more to say, and fewer people in this city willing to say anything worth hearing in return. He put on his hat and walked out into the July afternoon, and the sound of his footsteps on the front walk faded, and the street went on with its business, and Anna stood in the doorway of her mother's house, with her hands still against her skirt, and her heart doing something she had told it very firmly 3 years ago that it was no longer permitted to do. Her mother appeared at her elbow. Well, her mother said quietly. Don't, Anna said. I didn't say a word. You were about to. Her mother made a soft sound and patted her arm once and went back toward the kitchen. And Anna stood in the doorway for another minute, looking at the empty street where his carriage had been. And she pressed her hand flat against her chest, the way she had that morning when Diana came in with the letter. Not to calm her heart this time either, just to hold it in place. Thursday came the way Anna had known it would, too fast and without mercy. She had spent the better part of 4 days telling herself she wasn't going to the Hartley gathering. She had said it to her reflection Monday morning while pinning her hair. She had said it to the rosemary in the garden Tuesday afternoon when her hands needed something to do. She had said it Wednesday night with such quiet conviction that she had almost believed herself. Thursday evening, she was in her good blue dress with her hair properly done, sitting in the Hartley parlor on the east side of Boston, watching the door. She hated herself a little for it. Not enough to leave. The Hartley house was full, the way it always was in summer. Half the city's better families packed into rooms that were too warm, drinking lemonade that was too sweet, saying things to each other that required no thought and no courage and no particular honesty. Anna had attended these gatherings her whole life. She knew how to move through them, pleasantly, quietly, without drawing attention she hadn't asked for, and without giving offense she hadn't intended. She was good at it. Her mother had always said Anna's greatest gift was her ability to be present in a room without making anyone uncomfortable, which Anna had learned to accept as the compliment it was probably intended to be. She was standing near the window with a glass she wasn't drinking from when Diana found her. "You came," Diana said, and she sounded genuinely surprised, which Anna found faintly insulting. "I live in the same city you do, Diana. I attend the same gatherings. You've been avoiding them all summer." "I've been busy." Diana gave her a look that said she found that answer inadequate. Diana had a whole vocabulary of looks that required no words. She was wearing yellow. She always wore yellow in summer. It suited her. She knew it suited her. And she was beautiful, the way she had always been beautiful. The kind of beautiful that people noticed when she walked in, and commented on when she walked out. 3 years of marriage had only settled it, made it more certain, the way a good painting looks better once it's properly framed. "Jonathan is here," Diana said. "I assumed he would be. He's been asking after you." Anna turned to look at her sister then. "What do you mean, asking after me?" "I mean, he asked William twice this week whether you were expected tonight." Diana's voice was careful in a way that Anna recognized. Careful the way a person is careful when they're trying to make a thing sound smaller than it is. "I thought you should know." "Why?" "Because I'm your sister." "That's never been your primary motivation for telling me things, Diana." Diana's chin came up just slightly, a small, almost invisible flinch. "That's unkind." "It's accurate." Anna set her glass down on the windowsill. "What do you want?" "I want you to be careful," Diana said, and now her voice had dropped, and the careful tone had shifted into something that felt more genuine, and therefore more difficult to dismiss. "I know what you felt for him, Anna. I've always known. I'm not blind, and I'm not stupid, and I know my sister's face when she's—" "Don't," Anna said quietly. "Working very hard to feel nothing." The room around them went on with its noise. Someone laughed too loudly near the fireplace. Someone else was playing the pianoforte badly in the back parlor. The evening went on being what it was, indifferent and relentless, while Anna stood very still and kept her expression exactly where she needed it. "You don't know what I felt," Anna said, "and you don't know what I feel now. I know you came tonight. I come to these gatherings all the time." "You haven't. Not all summer." Diana stepped slightly closer, and for a moment she was not the charming, polished woman Boston society had voted its favorite daughter 2 years running. She was just Diana, Anna's older sister, the one who had shared her room until Anna was 12, and who still, on occasion, reached out and fixed Anna's hair without asking. "He came back different, Anna. He's not the man who left. I've talked to him. I've watched him across rooms. He is not all right. Most men who come back from war aren't all right. I'm not talking about the war. Diana hesitated. I'm talking about the way he looks at things. Like he's deciding whether they're real. She stopped. I don't know how to explain it. I just know that whatever you're carrying for him, whatever you've been carrying all this time, I don't want you to be hurt because of a choice I made. The silence between them had a different quality than usual. Not the cool, managed distance they'd perfected over years. Something raw, something that cost more. Is that guilt? Anna said. Diana looked at her steadily. Yes. Anna had not expected that. She had expected a deflection, a pivot, another layer of careful management. Not that single, plain word spoken with its eyes open. She looked at her sister for a long moment. You didn't do anything wrong, she said finally. You made the choice you had to make. I made the choice I wanted to make. There's a difference. Diana, I want you to be happy, Diana said, and her voice was quiet enough now that it didn't carry past the two of them. I know that might not mean much, coming from me, but I want that for you, more than I've probably shown. Anna didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't either dismiss what had just been offered or give it more weight than she was ready to hold in this particular room on this particular evening. Then she saw him across the room, and every carefully managed thought she'd had for 4 days rearranged itself without her permission. Jonathan was standing near the far doorway, talking to an older gentleman Anna recognized as Judge Carver. He was dressed well, better than he'd been at her mother's house, more formally, but the stillness was the same, that careful, contained quality, like a man who had learned to take up only the space he absolutely needed and no more. He was listening to the judge with his full attention, and even from across the room, Anna could see the effort behind that attention, the deliberate quality of it. Then he looked up. His eyes found her in about 3 seconds flat, which was either coincidence or it wasn't. And Anna was not foolish enough to believe in coincidence where eyes were concerned. He said something to Judge Carver. The judge nodded. Jonathan excused himself. He's coming over, Diana said, very quietly. I can see that. Anna. Go find your husband, Diana. A pause. Then Diana picked up her skirts just slightly and stepped away into the crowd. And Anna turned her body slightly toward the window and picked up her glass again and pretended to be studying something in the middle distance. And she was aware of exactly how transparent that performance was. And she did it anyway. Miss Farwell, his voice just behind her right shoulder. She turned. Mr. Pierce. You came, he said. And just like Diana, he sounded surprised, except that on him it sounded different. Not like disbelief, but like relief. The kind of relief a person tries to keep out of their voice and doesn't entirely manage. I told you I hadn't decided, she said. You did. The corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile. I'm glad the decision went this way. You asked after me, she said. She had decided on the walk over that if she was coming at all, she wasn't going to waste the evening pretending she didn't know things she knew. You asked William Hurst whether I'd be here tonight. Jonathan looked at her steadily. I did. Why? Because I wanted to know. No hesitation, no management, just the plain fact of it set down between them. I found myself thinking about our conversation on Friday and wanting to continue it, and wanting to know whether I'd have the chance. Most men don't go through a woman's brother-in-law to find out if she'll be at a party. Most men haven't been away for 3 years, he said. I find I've lost patience with the longer routes. She considered him. He meant it. That was the thing about Jonathan Pierce, that she had recognized across a dozen dinner tables and never quite known what to do with. He meant what he said. There was no performance in him. Whatever war had done, it hadn't given him that particular habit of Boston society. The habit of saying the decorative version of things instead of the true version. "All right," she said. "What did you want to continue?" "You said something on Friday," he said, "about Diana, about encouraging her to write to me." He paused. "I've been thinking about it since. I'd like to understand it better." "I already told you why I did it." "You told me part of it." She looked at him. He looked back. "You're persistent," she said. "I've had 3 years of military discipline. I've learned to hold a position." This time she was the one whose mouth almost moved. "What is it you think I didn't tell you?" "I think," Jonathan said carefully, "that you encouraged your sister to write to a man you had feelings for, because it was the right thing to do, and because you were not the kind of woman who would do otherwise, even when it cost you something. And I think it cost you considerably." The room went on around them, noise and movement, and the ordinary machinery of a Boston summer evening. And Anna stood inside it with her glass in her hand, and her heart doing that thing she had told it not to do. And she thought about 3 years, about evenings in the same city, in her mother's house, in the garden, in the small room with a good light where she read books she couldn't always follow, because her mind kept returning to the same unanswerable questions. About the discipline of silence. About what it cost, precisely, to want something you had no right to want. "You shouldn't assume things about what I felt," she said, and her voice was steady, which she credited to 24 years of practice. "Shouldn't I? It's presumptuous." "It may be." He wasn't retreating. He wasn't moving at all. "Tell me I'm wrong." 4 seconds. 5. The pianoforte in the back parlor had stopped. "I'm not going to have this conversation in the middle of the Hartley gathering," Anna said. "No," Jonathan agreed. "Probably not." A pause. "There's a garden." "Mr. Pierce." 5 minutes, he said. "That's all I'm asking." She looked at him. The still hands, the careful eyes, the faint lines that hadn't been there 3 years ago. And she made the decision she'd been building toward since Friday without quite admitting it. 5 minutes, she said. The garden was quieter, but not empty. 2 older women were seated near the rose bushes, deep in conversation, their backs to the path. Anna and Jonathan walked to the far end without hurrying, and the evening air carried the smell of boxwood and the distant sound of the street. And it was all entirely ordinary, and nothing about it felt ordinary at all. "My mother asked me this morning," Jonathan said, when they'd stopped walking, "whether I had any intentions toward anyone in Boston." Anna turned to look at him sharply. "Your mother is in Boston?" "She arrived Tuesday. She's staying at the Harrington House on Summer Street." A pause. "She asked because she's heard things. Boston is a small city, whatever it thinks of itself." "What has she heard?" "That I visited the Farwell house on Friday," he said simply. "That I asked after you through William Hurst. That I looked for you when I arrived tonight." He looked at her. "She's not a woman who misses patterns." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I was renewing acquaintances." Anna laughed. She hadn't meant to. It came out before she could stop it. Short and genuine. The kind of laugh that happens when something is true and absurd in equal measure. Jonathan looked at her when she did it, and something shifted in his face. Something real and unguarded. There and gone in a second. "She didn't believe me either," he said. "What do you want, Jonathan?" She used his given name without deciding to, and felt it land, and didn't walk it back. "Not what you're supposed to want. Not what makes sense given every circumstance and every convention and every reasonable expectation of a man in your position. What do you actually want? He was quiet for a moment. Not the managed quiet of a man stalling, but the genuine quiet of a man who was taking the question seriously because he thought it deserved to be taken seriously. I want to stop feeling like I came home to the wrong life, he said finally. I want to stop sitting in rooms I'm looking at people and feeling like everything is slightly the wrong temperature, like it's all just barely off from what it ought to be. He paused. I want to talk to someone who says what they mean. I want... Another pause, shorter. I want to have the conversations we keep almost having, and then stopping. We keep stopping because there are things that can't be said. Name one. She looked at him steadily. You were engaged to my sister. I was. That's over. It's not something that becomes over simply because you decide it is. It lives in rooms, in families, in the way people look at each other across tables. She paused. Diana knows I'm here. She saw you come toward me. She'll be watching when we go back inside. Let her watch. Jonathan, Anna. Her name in his mouth, just like that, without the formal prefix, simple and direct. She felt it the way you feel a door opening somewhere in a house you'd thought was all closed rooms. I came back from 3 years of war. I watched men die for reasons that made less sense the longer I was there. I have very little patience left for the idea that the truth ought to wait because of what people in parlors might think about it. He looked at her. Tell me I'm wrong to be here. Tell me this is not what I think it is, and I'll take you back inside and we'll say nothing further about it. The two women near the roses had gotten up and gone back toward the house. They were alone. I can't tell you that, Anna said. Then, I can tell you it's complicated, she said. I can tell you that whatever this is, it doesn't exist in a simple world. It exists in a world that includes my sister and your family's expectations, and every person in that room in there who knew you were engaged to Diana Farwell before you shipped out. She kept her voice even. I am not a woman who ignores those things. I'm not asking you to ignore them. Then what are you asking? He looked at her for a long moment. I'm asking you not to walk away from this because it's difficult. I spent 3 years walking toward things that were difficult. I'm not afraid of it. Being shot at and being talked about in Boston drawing rooms are not the same kind of difficult. No, he said. One of them is considerably worse. She stared at him. He held her gaze with complete steadiness. And then she saw it. The faint light in his expression. The very serious man's version of humor. The acknowledgement that he had made a joke at his own expense and meant it. She pressed her lips together. She would not laugh again. She had given him that once tonight, and she was not made of endless resources. 5 minutes, she said. You said 5 minutes. I did. It's been longer. It has. He didn't move. Are you going to tell me to leave? The night was warm and still, and the garden smelled of boxwood, and the distant sound of the street had faded to almost nothing, and Anna Farwell stood in it with her hands still at her sides and her heart entirely out of her control. And she thought about 3 years of doing the right thing, the sensible thing, the quiet and appropriate and invisible thing. No, she said. He exhaled, just slightly, barely perceptible, but she heard it. The release of something held. Then I'd like to call on you tomorrow, he said. Formally, properly, with your mother present if you'd like her there. That's a considerable step from renewing acquaintances. I told you I've lost patience with the longer routes. She turned toward the house. Come and call then, Mr. Pierce, she said, and she walked back through the garden without looking back. And she made sure her pace was even and her head was level, and she gave nothing away to any of the 12 people she passed on the way back through the Hartley parlor to find her coat. She did not look for Diana on her way out. She knew Diana had been watching. She knew the morning would bring a conversation she was not looking forward to. She knew every complication she had named in the garden was real, and would remain real, and would not be resolved by a 5-minute conversation under a Boston summer sky. She knew all of it. She walked home through the warm July evening with her heart loud in her chest and tomorrow on her mind. And for the first time in 3 years, the quiet she'd built around herself so carefully felt less like safety and more like something she was ready to let go of. That terrified her. She was counting on it. He came the next morning at 10 o'clock, which was exactly when a man called formally on a woman in Boston in the summer of 1810, and Anna had been awake since 5. She hadn't slept well. She hadn't expected to. She had lain in her small room with the good light and stared at the ceiling and had the argument with herself that she'd been putting off since Friday. The real one, not the managed version she'd been running in polite rotation. The one where she said the things out loud that she'd been refusing to think clearly. She was in love with Jonathan Pierce. She had been in love with Jonathan Pierce for somewhere between 2 and 4 years, depending on when you decided the thing had properly started. And she had spent the better part of that time being extremely disciplined about it. And the discipline had worked reasonably well, right up until he walked back through her mother's parlor door on a Friday afternoon and looked at her with those same dark eyes and said her name like it was just a name and not a thing she felt in her spine. That was the honest version. She had given herself permission to think it at approximately 2 in the morning, alone in her room, with no audience and nothing to perform for. By 10 o'clock, she had put it away again and replaced it with something more manageable. Be careful. That she could work with. That had operational value. Her mother received Jonathan in the parlor. Anna sat across from him in the chair she always used, the one near the window, and her mother sat between them like a very elegant piece of punctuation, and they had a perfectly correct conversation about the weather and the state of the roads from Philadelphia, and whether the Hartley gathering had been well attended. Jonathan answered every question her mother asked with the full, genuine attention of a man who understood that he was being evaluated and had no objection to the process. He didn't perform. He didn't charm. He was simply present in the room, honest and direct, and Anna watched her mother recalibrate in real time, watched the polite hostess expression shift slowly into something more like actual interest. "You'll stay for the midday meal," her mother said. It was not quite a question. "I'd be glad to," Jonathan said. He looked at Anna when he said it. She looked back without giving him anything to read, which cost her more than it should have. The meal was manageable. Her mother carried most of it, which was a kindness Anna recognized and did not take for granted. Jonathan asked about her mother's garden, which was the right question. Her mother had opinions about the garden that could fill a reasonable afternoon, if properly invited. And Anna ate her food and said the appropriate things, and was grateful for every minute she wasn't required to hold his gaze across the table. Afterward, her mother said she needed to rest and excused herself with the unhurried certainty of a woman who had decided something and was not explaining her reasoning. And Anna and Jonathan were left alone in the parlor for the second time in a week. "Your mother," Jonathan said. "I know," Anna said. "She's deliberately leaving us alone. Yes, I'm aware." "Do you mind?" She looked at him. "Would it change anything if I did?" He considered that with the seriousness he gave most things. "No," he admitted. "I'd still want to talk to you. I'd just feel worse about it." "Then no," she said. "I don't mind." He set down his glass and looked at her directly. "I need to tell you something," he said, and his voice had shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. The formal ease of the midday meal was gone. Something I should have said last night in the garden before I asked to call on you. It wasn't fair to ask that without saying it first. Anna kept her hands still. All right? I am not entirely well, he said. I want to be plain about that. I came back from the front, and I am functional, and I am managing, but I am not the man I was before I left. I don't sleep the way I should. I have days where everything feels distant, off, like I'm watching my own life through glass. He paused. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know it before you allow a man to call on you formally, not after. She looked at him for a long moment. How long have you been carrying that? Since before I was discharged. Have you told anyone else? My commanding officer knew, toward the end. My mother suspects. A pause. I'm telling you. Why me? Because you told me the truth on Friday when it would have been easier not to, he said. And because I find I can't start something with you on a false foundation, even if the truth makes you reconsider. Does it? He asked, after she hadn't spoken for a moment. No, she said. It doesn't. She kept her voice even. I appreciate you telling me. I mean that. He exhaled. The same slight release she'd heard in the garden. I wasn't certain how you'd... I'm not fragile, Jonathan, she said. And I'm not looking for a man who hasn't been touched by anything. I'm looking for someone honest. The room was very quiet. Then I'd like to keep calling on you, he said, if you'll allow it. I'll allow it. It was the right answer. She knew it was the right answer. She also knew it was going to complicate every other relationship she had in this city, starting with her sister, and that the complications were going to arrive faster than she was ready for. She was right. Diana appeared at the Farwell house the following Tuesday morning without sending word ahead, which she had not done since they were children, and had not needed to announce themselves to each other. She came in through the front door the way she always had, called Anna's name from the hallway, and found her in the kitchen. He called on you, Diana said. Good morning, Diana. Formally, with Mother present. Yes. Anna turned from the counter. Would you like some tea? I don't want tea. I want you to tell me what you're doing. You know what I'm doing. Anna. Diana set both hands flat on the kitchen table, a gesture so out of character for her, so unpolished, so direct, that it stopped Anna mid-motion. I told you to be careful. And I am being careful. Careful doesn't look like allowing a man to call on you formally 1 week after he comes back from 3 years away. Maybe your version of careful and mine are different. My version doesn't end with you getting hurt. Anna set down the cloth she was holding and turned fully to face her sister. I need you to hear me say this clearly, Diana. I am 24 years old. I have been quiet and sensible and careful for every one of those years. I have watched other people make choices about their lives, and I have waited my turn, and I have not complained about any of it. She kept her voice level. I am not going to walk away from something real because it's inconvenient. Diana stared at her. Something real. You've spoken to him 3 times. 4. Anna, I have known him for years, Anna said. Through dinners and gatherings and every occasion your engagement brought him into this house. I know how he talks, and what he thinks about, and what he values, and how he treats people who have nothing to offer him. I know who he is. A pause. I've known for a long time. The silence that followed that was the longest one they'd had in years. Diana straightened up from the table. Her face had done something Anna couldn't entirely read. Not anger, not quite. Something more complicated, something that had grief in it. I know you have, Diana said quietly. That's what worries me. Why? Because if this goes wrong, Diana said, you won't recover from it quickly. You're not built for quick recovery, Anna. You hold things for a long time. It was, Anna thought, one of the most honest things her sister had said to her in recent memory. And it landed precisely because it was true. I know that about myself, Anna said. I'm choosing to go forward anyway. Diana picked up her gloves from the table. She looked at her sister for a long moment, with an expression that had shed most of its management and was just a face. A sister's face. Don't let him hurt you, she said. I mean that. Whatever you think I am, or what I want out of this, I mean that. She left without the tea. Anna stood in the kitchen alone and breathed for a moment, and then went back to what she'd been doing, because the morning had to be gotten through, regardless of what any of it meant. Jonathan called again on Thursday, and Friday, and the following Monday. By the end of the second week, they had settled into a rhythm that Anna hadn't anticipated and couldn't entirely account for. A rhythm that felt, in its bones, like something that had been waiting to happen, rather than something being built from scratch. They talked the way she had always wanted to talk at those dinner tables. About ideas, about history, about the shape of the country and what it was still figuring out about itself. He asked her questions and listened to the answers with his full attention. Not the polite performance of listening, but the real thing. The kind that made her feel like her words were landing somewhere and mattering. He told her about the war. Not all of it. There were things, she understood, that he wasn't ready to put into words, and she didn't press. But pieces of it. The particular loneliness of waiting. The way time moved differently under threat. The men he'd served with, the ones who'd come back, and the ones who hadn't. The particular weight of being the one still walking. She listened without flinching. She didn't offer comfort that would have made it smaller. She just stayed present with him in it, the way you stay present with someone who is carrying something heavy. Not by taking it from them, but by not leaving the room. He noticed. She could see that he noticed. You don't try to fix it, he said, one afternoon in the third week, in her mother's garden, where they had migrated because the parlor had been too warm. It's not mine to fix. Most people try. Most people are uncomfortable with sitting in something difficult. She looked at him. I'm not. He looked at her steadily. I know. A pause. I've been thinking about why that is. And what did you determine? That you've had practice, he said. Not unkindly, just accurately. She looked at him, startled. He looked back. You've been sitting in difficult things for a long time, he said. Quietly, without asking anyone to acknowledge it. He paused. I think I spent a lot of time not seeing that. You were occupied with other things. I was, he said. I'm not now. The garden was warm and still, and her mother was definitely watching from the kitchen window, and Anna was entirely aware of all of that. And she looked at Jonathan Pierce and thought, here is a man who came back from the worst 3 years of his life, and the first thing he did with his honesty was aim it at you. That meant something. She knew what it meant. She was working up to letting herself believe it. It was the last Thursday of July when everything broke open. She was in the parlor with her mother when William Hurst arrived at the door without Diana, which was unusual enough to register immediately. William was a pleasant man, solid, civic-minded, the kind of man who took his responsibilities seriously and had been, as far as Anna could tell, a reasonably good husband to her sister. He had never appeared at the Farwell house alone. He had certainly never appeared with his hat in his hands and something badly wrong behind his eyes. Mrs. Farwell, he said. Anna, I apologize for coming without... He stopped, cleared his throat. There's a matter. I need to... Another stop. Is there somewhere I could sit down? They sat in the parlor. William sat in the wing-back chair, their father's chair, the one everyone always found, and he turned his hat over in his hands twice before he said anything. "I've had news," he said, "about my business concerns." A pause. "It's not good news." Anna looked at her mother. Her mother looked at William. "How bad?" her mother asked, with the directness of a woman who had spent 60 years learning that vague bad news was worse than specific bad news. William was quiet for a moment. "My primary investor has withdrawn," he said. "Completely. There are debts that I had anticipated covering through the next 2 quarters of returns that I will not now be able to cover." He turned the hat again. "I'm telling you because Diana knows, and I wanted her family to hear it from me directly rather than—" His voice went slightly uneven. "We may need to sell the house on Marlborough Street." The room went very still. "Where is Diana?" Anna asked. "At home. She didn't want to—" He cleared his throat again. "She's finding it difficult." Anna stood up. "I'll go to her." "Anna," her mother said. "She needs someone there," Anna said. "She won't ask for it. She never asks. But she needs someone there." She was at the door when her mother called her name again, quietly. She turned. "You're a good sister," her mother said. Just that, plainly, without decoration. Anna went. Diana's house on Marlborough Street was too quiet when Anna arrived. The kind of quiet that meant the servants were keeping to themselves, because the situation had an atmosphere they didn't know how to navigate. Anna went straight upstairs without asking anyone, and found Diana in the sitting room off the master bedroom, sitting in a chair with her back straight and her hands folded in her lap, and her face doing the thing it did when Diana Farwell was refusing to fall apart. Anna came in and sat across from her and said nothing. Diana looked at her. "William told you. He came to the house. I told him not to." A pause. "He doesn't listen to me about things like that." "Good," Anna said. Diana's chin wobbled, once, just slightly, before she controlled it. "This is not how my life was supposed to go." "I know. I made the right choices. I did everything." Her voice cracked on that last word, and she stopped and pressed her lips together and breathed through her nose until she had it back. "I was practical. I was sensible. I didn't wait for a man who might not come back. I made a rational decision, and now—" "Diana, don't tell me it's going to be all right." "I wasn't going to," Anna said. "I was going to tell you to stop performing." Diana blinked. "I'm not—" "You're sitting there with your back perfectly straight and your hands perfectly still, and you're holding yourself together by force of will. And there's nobody here but me." Anna leaned forward slightly. "Fall apart a little. I've seen it before. I can handle it." For a moment, Diana simply stared at her. Then her face crumpled. Not dramatically. Diana even cried with some elegance, which Anna had always privately marveled at. But genuinely, fully, the real thing behind the performance finally surfacing. She pressed one hand over her mouth and the other into her lap, and she cried the way a person cries when they've been holding it for too long, and someone finally said the right word to unlock it. Anna moved to the arm of her chair and put a hand on her shoulder and stayed there. "I'm scared," Diana said, when the worst of it had passed. Her voice was small, in a way Anna hadn't heard since they were children. "I'm genuinely scared, Anna." "I know." What if he can't fix it? What if we lose everything? What do I—" She stopped. "What do I do?" "You do what the women in this family have always done," Anna said. "You get up in the morning, and you handle what's in front of you, and you don't let anyone see you fold." Diana laughed despite herself, a wet, unsteady sound. "That sounds exhausting." "It is," Anna agreed. You're good at it, though. Diana looked at her. Her face was a wreck, and she knew it. And for once, she didn't seem to care. You know the worst part? She said. The absolute worst part of all of this? What? Jonathan Pierce is calling formally on my sister, Diana said, while my marriage is falling apart, and I cannot even be properly miserable about it because I genuinely want you to be happy. And that is the most inconvenient feeling I have ever had in my life. Anna stared at her. Diana stared back. Then Anna said, very quietly, You are a complete disaster, Diana. I know, Diana said. I really am. They sat there together in the too quiet house, while William's financial ruin settled over everything like weather. And the afternoon went on around them, and Anna kept her hand on her sister's shoulder. And she thought about how nothing in a life ever resolved cleanly, how every good thing carried someone else's complicated alongside it, how happiness and grief kept the same hours, how loving people meant holding all of it at once without setting any of it down. She thought about Jonathan and what she was going to tell him tomorrow when he called. She thought about what Diana had said. I know what you felt for him. I've always known. She thought about 3 years of silence and 1 week of the truest conversations she had ever had in her life. And she held her sister's shoulder and breathed through the afternoon and waited for the next thing to come. The way she had always waited, not passively, not helplessly, but with the steady, bone-deep patience of a woman who had learned that the things worth having were almost always the ones that asked the most of you first. Jonathan came the next morning, as he always did, at 10 o'clock, and Anna told him everything. Not the version she'd been composing in her head on the walk home from Marlborough Street, the careful, measured version that presented the facts without the weight of them. She told him the real version. William's investor, the debts, the house. Diana's face when it finally broke open. She told him in the parlor, with her mother conspicuously absent and her hands folded in her lap and her voice steady, because the situation required steadiness, and she was the kind of woman who gave a situation what it required. Jonathan listened without interrupting. That was one of the things she had come to trust about him. He didn't fill silences with reassurance just to make himself more comfortable. He let the thing be what it was before he said anything about it. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. How bad is it? He said. Not a question, a calibration. Bad enough that they may lose the house. William didn't give me figures. I didn't ask for them. That's between him and Diana. She paused. But his face when he came to us. A man doesn't look like that unless the ground has genuinely shifted. Does Diana have resources of her own, independent of William's business? Some. Her dowry was modest. She's been careful with it, I think, but modest is modest. Anna looked at him directly. I'm not telling you this because I want you to solve it. I'm telling you because it's going to be part of my life for the foreseeable future. And you've been calling on me formally for 2 weeks, and you told me you wanted honesty as a foundation. I did, he said. I meant it. He looked at her. Is there anything I can do? Not at the moment. If that changes, I'll tell you. She held his gaze. I'm not the kind of woman who carries things alone out of pride. I've done enough of that. Something moved in his expression. That quiet, unguarded thing she'd seen twice before, there and gone quickly. I know, he said. That's one of the things He stopped. What? He looked at her steadily. That's one of the things I most value in you, he said, choosing the word with care and placing it down carefully, like a man who had a different word in mind and was being deliberate about the pace. She heard the different word anyway. She was fairly certain he knew she heard it. Thank you for telling me about Diana, he said. I mean that. She's my sister, Anna said simply. Whatever is complicated between us, she's my sister. He nodded. He understood that. She could see that he understood it, in the way a man understands things that don't require explanation, in the bones. What neither of them said, what sat between them plainly enough to be in the room without being named, was that Diana's financial ruin had changed the geography of everything. A year ago, calling on Anna formally while Diana remained comfortably situated on Marlborough Street would have been one kind of complicated. Calling on Anna while Diana's marriage was quietly collapsing was another kind entirely. The city would talk. The city was already talking. And whatever Boston said about Jonathan Pierce returning from war and directing his attentions toward the quieter Farwell sister, it would say it louder and less kindly, now that the louder Farwell sister's circumstances had become the subject of drawing-room whispers. Anna knew this. She had thought about it at 2 a.m, which was becoming her designated hour for thinking about things she couldn't fix. She had decided it didn't change anything. She had decided that clearly and without drama, and then she had gone to sleep, which had taken another hour, but she had gotten there. I want to ask you something, Jonathan said. Ask. My mother wants to meet you. He said it plainly, without preamble or softening. She asked me this morning if I would bring you to call on her at the Harrington house. Formally. Anna looked at him. That's a significant step. It is. Your mother is... She has opinions, I imagine, about who is appropriate? My mother has opinions about everything, Jonathan said. It is one of her primary activities. The faint, serious humor again, aimed at himself. She also, when she decides a person has worth, defends them with a ferocity that has alarmed more than one Boston family over the years. And you think she'll decide I have worth? I think, he said, that she'll take one conversation with you and wonder why it took this long for anyone to pay proper attention. Anna held his gaze for a moment. You're not uncertain about this, she said. About me. About any of it. No. Why not? We've known each other. Properly known each other, spoken honestly, for less than a month. Because I have been at war, he said, with a directness that had no performance in it. And I have watched men spend the last hours of their lives regretting things they didn't do. And I have sworn to myself repeatedly that if I came back, I would not be the man who waited too long to do the obvious thing. He paused. You are the obvious thing, Anna. You have been the obvious thing for longer than I was smart enough to see. I am trying to correct that with some urgency. The clock on the mantel kept its pace. Anna kept her face still, with the effort of a woman who had long practice and current need in equal measure. Thursday, she said. I'll call on your mother Thursday. He exhaled. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. I have not met your mother. She met Eleanor Pierce on a Thursday afternoon in the front parlor of the Harrington house, and within 4 minutes she understood 2 things: where Jonathan had gotten his directness, and why Boston was simultaneously charmed and faintly terrified by the woman. Eleanor Pierce was 61 years old and moved through a room the way a ship moves through water. Not loudly, not aggressively, but with the absolute assurance of something that intends to get where it's going and has not factored in the possibility of obstruction. She had Jonathan's eyes, darker and sharper with age, and she used them the way an expert uses a good tool, precisely and without waste. She looked at Anna for approximately 10 seconds after the introduction, and then said, Sit down, Miss Farwell. I've been wanting to talk to you since my son came home from that war, looking like a man who'd lost something he hadn't named yet. Anna sat. Jonathan tells me you speak plainly, Eleanor said. I try to. Good. I'm going to do the same. She folded her hands in her lap with the efficiency of a woman who didn't need to fidget to think. My son was engaged to your sister. Your sister married another man. My son came home, called on your family, and has now spent 3 weeks in consistent formal attendance on you." She paused. "Boston is talking." "I'm aware," Anna said. "What are they saying doesn't concern me particularly," Eleanor said. "What concerns me is whether you understand what you're walking into." Another pause. "This is not a simple courtship, Miss Farwell. My son carries things from that war that he will be carrying for years." He is honest about that, which is more than most men manage. But honesty about a difficulty and the actual living with that difficulty are different things. I want to know that you understand the difference. "I do," Anna said. "Tell me why." Anna looked at Eleanor Pierce directly. "Because I've been watching Jonathan for 3 weeks. Not the man he's presenting. The man underneath the presentation. And I can see that he has hard nights and harder mornings, and days when the world looks wrong to him. I can see it in the way he holds his hands, and in the particular quality of silence he gets when something reminds him of something he's not ready to talk about." She paused. "I'm not frightened by it. I'm not looking for an easy life. I'm looking for a real one." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "You've been watching him that carefully," she said. "Yes, for 3 weeks. For longer than that," Anna said. "I've known your son for years, Mrs. Pierce. I've been watching him for years. The last 3 weeks, I've just been allowed to do it openly." The silence that followed had a quality to it. Not hostile, not approving. Something more like a door swinging slightly open. Eleanor Pierce looked at her steadily, and Anna held the look without flinching. And then Eleanor said, "My son told me you encouraged your sister to write to him while he was at the front." "He told you that?" "He tells me most things." A pause. "Why did you do it?" "I already told Jonathan why." "Tell me." Anna breathed once. "Because he was at war, and letters matter. Because Diana needed reminding of her obligations, and because—" She stopped for half a second, just half. "Because I could not write to him myself, and making sure someone did was the nearest thing to it that was available to me." The room went quiet. Eleanor Pierce sat with that for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "I see." "I'm not asking for your sympathy," Anna said. "I'm answering your question." "No," Eleanor said. "You're not asking for sympathy. That's rather the point." She uncrossed her hands and smoothed her dress once, efficiently. "I have one more question." "All right." "My son is the Duke of Milford. That title comes with property, obligation, and a particular set of expectations from a particular set of people who feel they have standing to have expectations." Eleanor's voice was level and clear. "His choosing you, the younger sister, not the one he was engaged to, while the city is already watching, will generate opposition. Not from me, but from others. Are you prepared for that?" Anna looked at Eleanor Pierce and thought about 3 years of sitting at dinner tables saying almost nothing. 3 years of being the quiet one, the shadow, the background. 3 years of watching other people make choices and waiting for her turn. "Mrs. Pierce," she said, "I have been preparing for something my whole life. I believe this is what it was." Eleanor Pierce looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was a small smile, controlled and genuine, the same quality as her son's almost humor. "Jonathan," she said, raising her voice slightly toward the doorway where he had been deposited by mutual unspoken agreement. "You may come back in." He appeared in the doorway with the careful expression of a man who has been listening for tone and has cautiously concluded that the tone is acceptable. "Well?" he said to his mother. "She'll do," Eleanor said. "Considerably more than do, if you'd like my honest opinion, which you will get regardless." Anna looked at the floor for 1 second to compose herself, and when she looked up, Jonathan was looking at her, and the expression on his face was the most unguarded thing she had seen from him yet. Open and certain, and something that looked, undeniably, like a man arriving somewhere he'd been trying to reach for a long time. She looked back at him and let him see it. She was done managing what showed on her face when she looked at Jonathan Pierce. She was done with a lot of things. The news about William Hearst broke publicly in the second week of August. It broke the way financial ruin always broke in Boston, gradually, then all at once. There had been whispers in the merchant quarters for days before it appeared in the papers. Then it appeared in the papers, and the whispers became conversations, and the conversations became the primary subject of every drawing-room gathering in the city, and Diana's name was attached to all of it in the particular way that women's names always got attached to their husbands' disasters, not as participants, but as exhibits. Poor Diana Hearst. Poor Diana Farwell, that was. What a position to be in. Anna went to Marlborough Street every day that week. Diana was holding herself together with the particular fierce dignity of a woman who had decided that the city was not going to see her fold, which Anna recognized as the right strategy and the personally costly one simultaneously. William was in meetings with creditors. Diana was receiving visitors in the parlor and saying the appropriate things and looking beautiful and composed, while the house around her was being quietly valued by men with ledgers. On Thursday of that week, Jonathan came with her. She hadn't asked him to. He had arrived at the Farwell house at 10 o'clock, as he always did, and she had told him she was going to Marlborough Street, and he had said, "I'll come," with the matter-of-fact simplicity of a man for whom this was not a complicated decision. "Jonathan," she said. "Diana is your sister," he said. "Whatever is between Diana and me, or was between us 3 years ago, does not outweigh the fact that she is in a difficult position, and you are going to her, and I would like to be useful, if I can." He picked up his hat. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." She looked at him for a moment. "You understand how this will look? The Duke of Milford calling at the Hearst house during a financial scandal? Yes, I understand how it will look." He was perfectly steady. "I don't much care how it looks." She picked up her gloves. "All right." Diana's face when she came into the parlor and found both of them standing there did something complicated. Surprise, then calculation, then something rawer underneath both of those. She looked at Jonathan with the expression of a woman conducting a very rapid internal inventory. "Jonathan," she said. "Diana," he inclined his head. "I'm sorry about your circumstances. I mean that genuinely." She studied him for a moment. "You came with Anna." "I did." "Why?" "Because she's coming every day," he said simply. "And I'd like to be where she is. And I'd like to be useful, if there's anything useful to be done." The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then Diana said, "The creditors want to talk to someone who understands bond structures. William is not at his best right now, and the men they've sent have a language I don't speak." She looked at Jonathan with the clear eyes of a woman who had set her pride down because circumstances required it. "Do you speak it?" "I spent 3 years managing an estate by correspondence from a war front," he said. "I speak it reasonably well." Diana looked at Anna. Anna looked back at her. "All right," Diana said. Jonathan spent 2 hours at the Hearst house that afternoon talking with creditors. Anna sat with Diana in the back sitting room and did not pretend that this was not extraordinary. And Diana did not pretend either, which was its own kind of progress between them. "He loves you," Diana said at one point, flatly, without drama. "He hasn't said so." "He doesn't have to say it," Diana said. "He came here, for you, to a house that belongs to the man who replaced him. She looked at her hands. That's not obligation. That's love. Anna was quiet. I want you to know, Diana said, that I am glad. I'm saying that without any management. I'm saying it because it's true and because it costs me something, and I want you to know that I mean it, even though it costs me something. Anna reached over and took her sister's hand. Diana let her. They sat like that until Jonathan came back into the room with his jacket slightly rumpled and something that looked faintly like purpose in his expression. The immediate situation is more manageable than the creditors implied, he said, directing this at Diana with the directness of a man reporting to someone who deserved accurate information. William has assets he hasn't liquidated. The house may not need to go. The next 6 months will be difficult, but not insurmountable if the decisions are made correctly. Diana stared at him. How do you know that? I know what I know, he said. I'll come back tomorrow with some names, people who can help. If William is willing to take advice from people who don't have an interest in his failure. Diana sat with this for a moment. Why are you doing this? Jonathan looked at her steadily. Because Anna loves you, he said, and what Anna loves matters to me. It was the first time he had said it. Not to Anna, not directly, but in front of her, in front of Diana, in a room where it couldn't be walked back or qualified or managed into something smaller. Anna felt it land in her chest, like something that had been looking for that exact place. Diana's eyes went bright for just a moment before she controlled it. She nodded once, with the precision of a woman accepting something she hadn't expected. Thank you, she said. They walked back to the Farwell house in the August heat, and the city went about its business around them. And Anna was aware of Jonathan beside her, not touching her, they were on a public street, but close enough that she could feel the steadiness of him. And she thought about all the ways a person could spend a life waiting for something and never get it. And all the ways a person could wait and then suddenly it was just there, standing next to you on a Boston street in summer. Real and present and nothing like what you'd imagined, because what you'd imagined had been insufficient. You told Diana you loved me, she said. Not an accusation, not quite a question. I said, what Anna loves matters to me. Jonathan. I was working up to the direct version, he said, and there was something in his voice that she had not heard before. A slight unsteadiness, just barely there. The first crack in the composure of a man who held himself together extremely well. I had a particular moment in mind, I was going to... He stopped. This is not how I planned it. She stopped walking. He stopped a step later and turned to look at her. They were on a public street in Boston in August, with people all around them, and she looked at him. The careful eyes, the still hands, the lines the war had written on his face. The man who had come back from 3 years of something terrible and aimed his first act of honesty at her. And she said, Then don't plan it. Just say it. He looked at her for a long moment. I love you, he said. I have been coming to understand it for 3 years without having the good sense to recognize what I was coming to understand. I love you, Anna, and I intend to ask you to marry me. And I am telling you that now so that you have time to think about it clearly before I ask. Because you are a woman who values thinking clearly, and I respect that about you, even when it makes things more difficult. She was quiet for exactly 1 moment. How much time, she said, do you think I need? He studied her face. How much do you want? She looked at him steadily. I have been thinking clearly about this for 3 years, she said. I don't need more time. The street went on around them, carts and voices and the ordinary machinery of a Boston August afternoon. And Jonathan Pierce looked at Anna Farwell with his whole unguarded face and said, "Then will you—" "Yes," she said. She said it before he finished the sentence. She had been waiting long enough. She said yes on a public street in Boston in the middle of August, with cartwheels rattling past and a woman selling bread 30 feet away, and Jonathan Pierce stood there looking at her like a man who had just been handed something he'd been afraid to ask for. "You said it before I finished," he said. "I told you I didn't need more time. You didn't even let me ask the question properly." "Jonathan," she looked at him steadily, "I have been answering that question in my head for 3 years. I was ready." He looked at her for a long moment. That full, thorough attention she had come to understand as the most honest thing about him. And then something happened in his face that she had never seen before. Not the almost smile, not the careful humor, not the managed steadiness. Something open and uncomplicated and entirely real. Something that looked like a man who had finally, after a very long time, put something heavy down. "All right," he said quietly. "All right." They stood there on that Boston street in August, and the world went on around them, and neither of them moved for a moment. And it was the most ordinary, extraordinary thing Anna Farwell had ever been part of. Then he offered her his arm, and she took it, and they walked the rest of the way to her mother's house. And she was aware with every step of his steadiness beside her, and she thought, "This is what it feels like. This is actually what it feels like." She had wondered, sometimes, in those 3 years of discipline and management, whether she had built the feeling up into something it couldn't possibly be in reality. Whether the thing she'd been carrying was more about the idea than the man. Whether, if she ever actually had him, really had him, present and honest and aimed directly at her, it would be smaller than she'd imagined. It was not smaller. It was considerably larger and considerably more complicated, and entirely worth it. Her mother was in the kitchen when they came in, which meant her mother was pretending to be in the kitchen while actually listening for the quality of footsteps in the hallway. Anna had always known her mother's listening habits. She had inherited them. "Mother," Anna said from the hallway. A brief pause. "In here." They went into the kitchen, and Anna stood in the doorway with Jonathan beside her and said, "He asked me to marry him." Her mother turned from the counter. She looked at Anna. She looked at Jonathan. She looked back at Anna. "And?" her mother said. "I said yes." Her mother set down what she was holding, crossed the kitchen, and took Anna's face in both hands the way she had done when Anna was small and had needed to be looked at clearly. She looked at her for a long moment. Her eyes were bright, but her face was steady, because she was her mother, and steadiness was the family inheritance. "Good," she said. Just that word. And then she pulled Anna in and held her with both arms, briefly and completely. And Anna felt the full weight of it. Her mother's relief, her mother's love, her mother's 3 years of watching her daughter carry something without saying a word about it. Then her mother released her and turned to Jonathan and said, "You understand what you're getting." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "You understand that she is worth considerably more than this city has given her credit for." "I do," he said. "I intend to spend a significant amount of time correcting that oversight." Her mother looked at him for a moment with those same careful eyes. "See that you do," she said. Then she went back to the counter and said, "Sit down, both of you. I'll put on tea." They told Diana that evening. Anna went alone to Marlborough Street, which was the right decision and the harder one, because some things needed to be delivered without witnesses. She found Diana in the back sitting room, the same chair, the same straight back, but something slightly less armored about her than in previous weeks. Jonathan's visits, his practical intervention with the creditors, the names he had provided, and the introductions he had made. They had not solved everything, but they had shifted the ground enough that Diana was no longer sitting in her chair, braced for complete collapse. She was sitting in it like a woman in a difficult season. That was different. That was manageable. "I need to tell you something," Anna said. Diana looked at her. She read Anna's face in the particular way sisters read each other's faces, faster than language, below the level of words. And Anna watched her read it, and watched her understand it, and watched the understanding move through her. "He asked you," Diana said. "Yes." "And you?" "Yes." Diana breathed. One breath, deliberate, the kind that carries weight being managed. Her hands were in her lap, and she looked at them for a moment before she looked back up at Anna. "When?" she said. "This afternoon." "On his schedule, then?" A faint sound that was almost a laugh. "He doesn't waste time. He spent 3 years at war," Anna said. "He told me he came back with no patience for the longer route." "No." Diana was quiet for a moment. "No, I imagine he didn't." She looked at her hands again. "How did Mother take it?" "Well, of course she did. She's been waiting for this since you were 19. Diana's voice was dry, but not unkind. Not unkind at all, actually. "She always thought it should have been you." Anna stared at her. "What?" Diana looked up. "Mother. She always thought Jonathan was— She never said it to me outright. She wouldn't have. But she thought he was better suited to you than to me." A pause. "She was right. I was just the one who was available." "Diana!" "I'm not being self-pitying," Diana said, and her voice was clear. "I'm being honest, which is, apparently, what this family is doing now." The almost laugh again, slightly more real this time. "I made my choices, Anna. I made them for my reasons, and I have to live with them, and I am living with them. Some days that's easier than others." She straightened slightly. "But I am genuinely glad for you. I told you that before, and I'm telling you again. Jonathan Pierce choosing you is the one part of this entire year that I can look at without complication." Anna crossed the room and sat on the arm of her sister's chair, the way she had weeks ago when Diana's face had finally crumpled. She didn't touch her this time. She just sat close enough that the proximity said what she couldn't put into words. That she was still here, still her sister, that the happiness was not coming at Diana's expense, that she intended to stand by her through the difficult season, the same way she'd stood by her through every other one. Diana leaned her head against Anna's shoulder for exactly 3 seconds. Then she sat straight again. "You'll have a beautiful life," Diana said quietly. "I fully intend to take partial credit for it by way of being the sister who vacated the position." Anna made a sound that was entirely undignified. Diana's mouth finally curved into something genuine. "There it is," Diana said. "I've been trying to make you laugh properly for weeks." "You're impossible," Anna said. "I'm your sister," Diana said. "Same thing." The engagement was announced publicly the first week of September. Boston did exactly what Boston always did with information that didn't fit neatly into its existing categories. It talked about it constantly, while pretending to find the talking slightly beneath itself. The Duke of Milford and Anna Farwell. The younger sister, the quiet one, the one who had always been at those dinner tables saying almost nothing, while her dazzling sister held the room. Anna heard the talking. She was not naive enough to think she wouldn't. She walked into the Prescott gathering 2 weeks after the announcement, with Jonathan's hand correctly at her elbow, and she felt the quality of attention in the room shift when they entered. That particular collective adjustment of a society recalibrating. And she kept her chin level and her face composed and said the appropriate things to the appropriate people, and let the city look at her as long as it needed to. 3 women made remarks that were designed to be heard. 2 of them questioned the timing. One of them, a Mrs. Alderton, who had opinions on everything and restraint about nothing, said, within clear earshot of Anna near the punch table, "It does seem rather quick and rather convenient, given the situation with the older sister." Anna set down her glass. She turned. "Mrs. Alderton," she said pleasantly, "how kind of you to be concerned. I'll tell Diana you are asking after her situation. She'll be so grateful for the sympathy." Mrs. Alderton opened her mouth, closed it. Anna picked up her glass again and turned back to the woman she'd been speaking with before, a kind widow named Mrs. Cassidy, who had the good grace to look quietly delighted, and she continued the conversation she'd been having as though nothing had been interrupted. Jonathan appeared at her elbow 30 seconds later. He had been across the room. He had moved quickly. "I heard that," he said very quietly. "I handled it." "I know you did." A pause. "It was impressive." "I have been preparing for the city's opinion of me my entire life," she said, just as quietly. "I'm somewhat overqualified for this particular conversation." He looked at her with that full, unguarded expression he no longer seemed to bother managing when it was directed at her. "I love you," he said. Simple and direct, and right there in the middle of the Prescott gathering, where anyone paying attention could see the shape of the words on his lips. "I know," she said. "I love you too. Now stand here and look impressive while I finish this conversation. You're useful as a backdrop." The corner of his mouth moved. "Yes, ma'am." She had not expected the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September, addressed to Jonathan in handwriting she didn't recognize. She knew about it because Jonathan brought it to her, came to the Farwell house at 9 o'clock rather than 10, with his coat slightly less composed than usual and the letter in his hand. And he gave it to her to read without explaining himself, which told her something before she'd read a word. The letter was from a man named Colonel Hargrove, his former commanding officer. It was 3 pages long. She read all of it. The substance of it was this. There were men in Jonathan's regiment who had filed formal complaints against 2 senior officers for conduct that had resulted in unnecessary casualties. Jonathan had been one of the primary witnesses to the events in question. The Army inquiry, which had been quietly opened and just as quietly closed 2 years prior, was being reopened under pressure from several families of men who had died. Jonathan's testimony was being formally requested. She read it twice. Then she set it down and looked at him. "You knew about this inquiry before," she said. "I knew it had been opened. I gave my account to the preliminary board before my discharge. I was told it had been resolved." He was very still. "I was not told accurately." "What happened?" she said. "In the events the letter mentions." He was quiet for a moment. Not the evasive quiet of a man avoiding a question. The specific quiet of someone deciding how much of a thing they can say out loud. "We were given orders that put a flank of 40 men into a position they couldn't hold," he said. "The officers who gave those orders had information that should have changed them. They chose not to act on that information." He paused. 12 men died who would not have died if different orders had been given. "And you reported it." "I reported it, and was told it had been reviewed and found to be within the scope of wartime command decisions." The edge in his voice was quiet but unmistakable. "Which is the answer you give when the officers in question have powerful families and the soldiers who died do not." Anna looked at him. "And now someone is pushing to reopen it." The father of one of the men, a man named Thomas Webb from Connecticut. His son was 22. Jonathan's voice was even. "He has been persistent for 2 years. I respect him enormously for it." "What will it cost you?" Anna said. Not delicately, directly. "To testify. to have your name in an official inquiry about wartime conduct, to be publicly associated with an accusation against senior officers. He looked at her. Potentially quite a lot. Socially. Yes, the officers in question have connections in Boston. Family who will not appreciate Jonathan. She held his gaze. Will you testify? No pause, not even a fraction of one. Yes. Good, she said. He looked at her. Good. Those families deserve the truth, she said. 12 men, 22 years old. She handed the letter back to him. You're going to testify, and I'm going to stand beside you while the connected families of Boston have opinions about it, and we are going to be entirely fine. He took the letter. He looked at her for a long moment. You're certain? I told you I was not looking for an easy life. She met his eyes. I meant it then. I mean it now. He exhaled. That same slight release she had heard in the garden at the Hartley house, on that first night, when she had told him she wasn't going to walk away. She had heard it enough times now to know what it meant. It meant Jonathan Pierce, who held himself together with considerable discipline and considerable effort, allowing himself to believe that the thing he was counting on was actually going to hold. She intended to keep holding. He testified in October. The inquiry was held over 3 days in a federal building on State Street. Anna did not attend. It was not appropriate for her to attend. But she knew the hours, and she was aware of them with her whole body. The way you are aware of something important happening at a distance. She went about her days. She visited Diana. She helped her mother in the garden. She read books she was actually able to follow now, which was new, which was something she noticed with private gratitude. Jonathan came to the house each evening after the sessions. He was tired in a way that went deeper than physical. The particular exhaustion of a person who has been required to revisit something they'd buried. But he was steady. He ate her mother's food and drank tea and told Anna what he could tell her about the day's proceedings. And she listened and didn't make it smaller, and didn't offer comfort that would have required him to perform gratitude. And by the third evening, she understood that this was what their life was going to look like. Not always simple, not always comfortable, but honest all the way through, which was worth more than either of those other things. The two officers were formally censured, not court-martialed. The Army's patience for fully accounting for itself had limits, but censured, the record corrected, the official version brought closer to the true version. Thomas Webb, the father from Connecticut, attended all 3 days. Jonathan introduced Anna to him after the final session, in the hallway outside the hearing room. Thomas Webb was a weathered man, with the hands of someone who had worked his whole life, and the eyes of someone who had been carrying grief for 2 years without setting it down. He looked at Jonathan and said, "Thank you. My boy deserved better than what they gave him." "He did," Jonathan said. "I'm sorry it took this long." Thomas Webb shook his hand. He looked at Anna. "You his wife?" "His fiancée," Anna said. The man looked at her with those grief-carrying eyes and said, "You take care of him. Men who do the right thing when it costs them something. They don't always know how to take care of themselves." "I know," Anna said. "I intend to." They were married in November, on a Saturday, in the church where Anna had attended services her entire life. Boston came. Boston always came to weddings, which was one of its more reliable qualities. They came to see the Duke of Milford marry the quiet Farwell sister, and they came to have opinions about the timing and the circumstances and the year that had preceded it. And they got what they came for, because the thing was real and visible, and not performing anything for anyone's benefit. Diana stood beside Anna. She held herself beautifully, because she was Diana, and she held herself beautifully in all circumstances. But she also held Anna's hand in the moment before Anna walked forward, briefly and tightly, the grip of a woman saying something she wasn't going to put into words. Anna squeezed back. Eleanor Pierce sat in the front pew and cried, with the contained precision of a woman who had earned the right to feel what she was feeling, and was going to feel it correctly. She had told Anna the week before, "I spent 3 years watching my son come home in letters that got shorter and colder, and I thought the war had taken the part of him that could love something properly. You gave it back. I want you to know I understand what that cost you, and I am grateful for every year of it." Anna had not had a response to that. She had simply taken Eleanor's hand. Jonathan stood at the front of the church and watched her walk toward him, and the expression on his face was the most unguarded she had ever seen from him. Open and certain and entirely without management. And Anna walked down that aisle in her mother's church on a November Saturday, and she did not look at the faces in the pews, and she did not think about what the city was going to say, and she did not think about 3 years of silence, or the particular discipline of loving someone from a distance without permission. She looked at Jonathan. He looked at her. And every careful, patient, costly year of waiting arrived at exactly the place it had always been heading. The months that followed were not uncomplicated. Life with Jonathan Pierce was not uncomplicated. There were nights when he woke from something she couldn't follow him into, and she learned to be present in those nights without demanding explanation. There were days when the war sat on him like weather, and she learned the difference between the days that needed talking and the days that needed quiet. There were the social costs of the inquiry. 2 families who removed themselves from their circle entirely, which Jonathan noticed and did not mention again, and which Anna considered an acceptable pruning. Diana's situation improved, slowly and imperfectly, the way difficult situations improve. Not all at once, not completely, but enough that the ground steadied. William took the advice Jonathan had provided. The house on Marlborough Street did not have to go. Diana stopped sitting with her back armored against collapse, and started sitting like a woman in a season she was getting through. Eleanor Pierce came to dinner every Sunday. Anna looked forward to it. And Jonathan, her husband, the man who had come back from 3 years of something terrible, and aimed his first real honesty at her and never once looked away. Jonathan woke each morning and was present in their life with the full, deliberate attention of a man who understood what he had and had no intention of being careless with it. One evening in December, 4 weeks after the wedding, they were sitting in the parlor of the house on Beacon Street that had become theirs. Her books on one shelf, his on another, the gap between them already narrowing as the months passed. And Jonathan was reading, and Anna was working on a letter to her mother. And the fire was going, and the house was warm and quiet, in the particular way that a house is warm and quiet when it is genuinely inhabited by people who want to be in it. He looked up from his book. He looked at her. "What?" she said, without looking up from her letter. "Nothing," he said. "I was just looking." She looked up then. He was watching her with that full, steady attention, and there was something in his face that was just peace, simple and real and entirely unperformed. "Are you happy?" she asked. She asked it directly, the way she always asked things, because she had spent too many years in indirect territory to have patience for it now. He thought about it. She loved that he thought about it, that he didn't reach for the easy answer, but actually looked at the question and considered it honestly, the way he did with everything. "Yes," he said. "Not without difficulty, not without the things that are still hard, but yes." He looked at her. Entirely. She looked back at him. "Good," she said. She went back to her letter. He went back to his book. Outside, December settled over Boston the way it always did, cold and certain and indifferent to the lives being lived beneath it. But inside that house on Beacon Street, Anna Farwell, Anna Pierce now, sat in the firelight and wrote her letter, and felt the steadiness of the man across the room, and she understood with her whole self that the waiting had not been wasted, that the silence had not been loss, that every year of discipline and patience and loving something from a distance without permission had been the exact and necessary road to exactly this. She had waited 3 years for a man to come home. He had come home, and he had chosen her, not by default, not by elimination, not as the consolation of a man who had lost something better, but deliberately, clearly, with his whole honest heart aimed at her and no one else. The way a man chooses when he finally understands what choosing actually means. That was the whole of it. That was the truth of it. And it was, without qualification, enough.